A story based on the concept of morality within a Game of Thrones-esque medieval setting and is a strategy RPG? Sign me up! In the interest of informing people who may not have the time or desire to dedicate a few hours of their life to playing the new demo or looking at and analyzing all the trailers, I'm gonna go ahead and break down everything you need to know about Triangle Strategy. I first made a video about Triangle Strategy about a year ago now when the first demo released, and while I liked the game, there were things I was confused about, or that didn't exactly feel right. This year, Square Enix has come back to us with a far more refined product. They surveyed us last year and took literally every drop of feedback I have to offer into consideration, and they fixed it all. Fantastic. And so we have the new demo, which comes off the back of the most recent Nintendo Direct, and I'm not even going to waste any more time and just tell you all to go play it. This demo is the actual game as it is ready for release, and it contains the first full 3 chapters of the game with all its features and nothing held back. Even better is the fact that you're allowed to carry your progress forward to the main game if you decide to eventually buy it, and there are no restrictions on how long you can play for. Of course, this wouldn't be a review or analysis without a slight spoiler warning, so I'll just let you know that I'm going to be talking about the first 3 chapters of the game and the elements and gameplay you'll find within them in extreme detail. So if you want to remain spoiler-free on certain aspects of the game, this is your chance to skip to whatever section you want to hear about in the times indicated on screen or in the description below. If you're familiar with my review series, The Sizzling Scale, we usually start off by talking about some of the more foundational elements of a game first, before diving into the meaty bits. So I'll start off with the music. If you've experienced Octopath Traveler, you'll remember that that game had a banger OST, and Triangle Strategy is no different. A lot of the themes are very fitting of the grand-scale medieval atmosphere that the game is trying to set, but without depriving itself of more personality-driven, quirky songs that accompany certain characters or groups. I was definitely jamming out to the music from the very first chapter, and I gotta say it doesn't disappoint in the slightest, as I expect it to continue to maintain the standard moving further into the game. The visuals in this game are the next thing I want to talk about, and they are absolutely stunning. Also a little throwback to Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy uses the HD 2D graphics to create some very charming sprite work and backgrounds that just look beautifully vibrant. They're full of life, and the animation quality is astounding. Throughout playing the demo, I was never unimpressed or turned off by anything, but I did encounter one little blip that I feel is worth mentioning here out of concern for it becoming a regular thing. I'm not someone who's usually uptight about graphical power or fidelity, but there were some instances where I'd notice a little period of blur or stutter when it came to the backgrounds we were in during the story segments. It never happened during battle or exploration sessions, it was purely story, and I'll try to leave an example of this playing while I'm talking here because I definitely have it recorded. It's pretty minor and mostly unnoticeable, but in the interest of being thorough, I feel like I have to mention it. This is a demo, however, and so I don't know if these are only isolated incidents and if the full main game will have this issue at all, actually. That's really the only problem I had. Everything else looked great, and the art for all the characters is amazingly done, too. Moving on to the next portion, I think I'm going to talk about the story first here, and save the gameplay for last, because that will probably be an extremely long section. This section is where I begin to have a little bit of concern about the game, though. Not for myself, but for the enjoyment of others. For a very, very long time, I've been a primarily Fire Emblem-focused channel, and while a lot of Fire Emblem's charm and allure comes from its characters and story, I think what Triangle Strategy provides may turn them away a bit, but let me take a step back and explain. I genuinely love what Triangle Strategy is doing here. The story and characters are all fully voiced, and the amount of lore and character development provided is so thorough and so detailed that it's just impressive. However, because of that, it generally has a lot of story and a lot of detail. To give you an idea, I spent about 4.5 hours playing this demo through to completion, and in total, I'd say maybe an hour of those were spent on the actual gameplay. The rest of the 3.5 were split between story segments and exploration and managing my team. So if you're not a fan of the narrative or exploring a mature, well-written story and just want to hop into the gameplay, then you might be a little bit punished playing this game. Now again, this may be a consequence of the demo being the early chapters having to establish a lot of characters, develop them, and introduce many different plot points. But here we are, so time to go through a few different things regarding the story. It's broken into a couple different segments. The first one is traditional linear story segments. These are your main plot and exposition scenes that you get in between battles where characters pretty much just talk and progress the story and tell you what's going on. There are a few decisions that it can let you make here that have an effect on where and how the story progresses, but I'll add more to that in the subsequent section about gameplay. Next, there's actually side story segments. On the map, sometimes you'll notice a green exclamation point, and these side stories will show you what's going on in other areas of the game, or even allow you to recruit new units if you have the requirements for them. It either provides you with some bonus lore and exposition, or a new unit, and I like the level of detail they've added here to really build up the world and make it feel full of life. These are totally optional, but they're also time limited, so you can either do them or you can straight up ignore them if you want. It's your choice. I feel like oftentimes games get way too focused on the main characters and their groups that they neglect the side characters in the game, and this one doesn't do that. This story is obviously written to be thorough due to the complex nature of it, and so I'm glad they actually did this. The side stories are generally short and non-intrusive anyways, and they're also all fully voiced, so it's really just an added bonus. Finally, let's talk about the story itself as a whole. Triangle strategy takes place on the continent of Norzelia following a major conflict over natural resources and trade routes called the Salt-Iron War. Each of the three nations involved controlled one major resource. The Kingdom of Glenbrook controlled trade routes, the Holy State of Hyzand controlled salt, and the Grand Duchy of Acefrost controls iron. Currently, a peace has been brokered between the three nations, and we're living in this moment of peace. Our main protagonist, Serenoa, is due to be married to Frederica, the sister of the Duke of Acefrost, to further solidify political relations. And throughout the demo, we are playing through the events that lead up to Serenoa and Frederica's wedding. Throughout these events, you meet a lot of characters from all three countries, and you begin to formulate your own army as you save Frederica from bandits, play an exhibition match against Hyzand, and then you get to choose either to go to Hyzand or Acefrost as an envoy and resolve a conflict there. It's a slow start to the story, but I think it's a necessary one to establish the plot and the characters while slowly starting to unravel some of their motivations, ambitions, and inner thoughts. And trust me, some of these scenes for the key characters are very well done, so much so that I've already got my eyes on a few people of interest. We don't quite see a major conflict just yet, but the demo starts to put some of the moving pieces into play that will no doubt evolve into a bigger issue later on down the line as you start to formulate your allies and enemies. Speaking of which, the unique thing about the story here is that you get to lead the direction in which your story goes. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about this in the gameplay section, but there are certain decisions you get to make that cause character responses to vary and even send you down different route splits with different events and different recruitable characters. This is going to create what I assume to be varied endings and events that generate a lot of replayability value, and I'm all for it. Your decisions actually matter, and being able to take an active participant role in the plot is amazing. Anyways, with that all out of the way, let's move on to talk about the gameplay. This game is absolutely loaded with gameplay elements, so like the previous section, I'll be breaking it down into a bunch of mini segments to make sure I cover all the bases for you guys. Just like anything in the world, I think it's best for me to start with the basics for you, so let's talk about the combat. This is still a grid-based, turn-based strategy RPG, but it operates a little bit different to Fire Emblem. Based on the unit's speed stat, they will be granted a turn earlier or later than other units. If a unit has drastically higher speed, sometimes this allows them to move twice before other units. You don't get to choose the order in which your units move, it's all based on speed. Of course, this also applies to your enemies, so while I did say it was turn-based, all the units in the map are put into a list of sorts, and then ranked based on their speed stat or skills or accessories or whatever might influence a unit's turn order. Based on this, you and your enemies then take turns moving. In addition to that, each unit has different skills depending on their class, and in order to use them you must spend something called TP, which recharges at a rate of 1 per turn, up to a cap of 3 total. This cap increases as your unit's class promote, but for now your base is 3. These skills can be anything from stronger attacks, healing, AoE magic, buffs, or debuffs, and of course every unit has the default option of using a normal attack. There are varying attack ranges based on your weapon, so the lance, for example, can attack at 1 to 2 range, bows can attack at 2 to 4 range, and things like magical tomes, rods, swords, and most melee weapons have just 1 range. Just to note, the map here also has things like elevation, which extends the range you can attack at if you're standing on the roof of a building, for example, but as far as I can see, this only applies to archers. Additionally, there are smaller levels of elevation, like stairs, that can increase your hit rate and damage if you use them to your advantage. Sometimes you just gotta tell someone that it's over because you have the high ground, even if you know they'll stubbornly just try it. The last thing to talk about here is attacking. And yes, I know it sounds like attacking is a fairly simple concept, but one thing Triangle Strategy does that adds on to this is that it allows you to combo with other party members if you're on opposing sides of the same enemy. Of note, this does also work with ranged units like archers and spear units. You just need to make sure that you're on the opposite sides of the enemy. This generates EXP for both units involved in it and allows you to do a lot more damage if you leverage it properly. Of course, your enemies can also utilize this to their advantage, and it seems like their AI has been programmed to do so make sure you pay attention. Critical hits are also in the game, and attacking from behind an enemy generates a guaranteed critical hit. So now let me talk about the class system, and through that we can break down a few different things I've noticed. Classes seem to have an effect on a lot of your base stats in this game, one of the more important ones being movement. It seems to me like mages and heavier armored units start out with 4 base movement. Most infantry units have base 5, while cavalry units have 6 movement. Your class type also decides what kind of skills you get. Tanks get a very clear provoke and counter skill set, while offensive units get an array of damage-based skills that may cause debuffs or swap enemy positions around. Mages are a different beast, however, as they seem to be broken down into offense and supports. Healers seem to only have healing skills from what I can see so far, though I can't exclude them from acquiring light magic later on into the game, as most RPGs tend to give them. However, offensive mages also seem to have an array of support options at the cost of them being specialized into a certain element. For example, a mage with fire access will only be able to use fire-based magic while having a weakness to ice. An ice mage will also only be able to use ice-based magic while having a weakness to fire, etc., etc. There are no weapon type advantages or disadvantages that I can see so far, but elemental weaknesses and resistances are present, as well as accessories that you can buy or get as drops that increase your resistances and base stats. There are 3 tiers of classes, and as far as I can see, the first promotion happens at level 10, and I'm not exactly sure when the second one does, but you use a promotion item called a Medal of Bravery at level 10, and it looks like it grants you access to the new class alongside some increased base stats and access to some new skills. At the moment, there don't seem to be any class trees, so your units are locked into a single class line, but I don't really have an issue with this. Pivoting off of the class system, I guess the next thing that makes sense to talk about is the weapon system. Just like classes, weapons seem to have 3 tiers of levels, and you're locked into your respective weapon type. Whether or not this changes the further you move into your class tree, I have no idea, because it looks like some people gain magic attack on promotion, so hybrid classes might be a thing moving on into the future. But at the moment, you start at weapon level 1 and can upgrade to 2 and 3 respectively if you have the required weapon upgrade items. These seem to be things like silver, crystals, various gemstones, leather, whatever matches the weapon type of the specific unit. In each weapon level, you also have access to certain passive skills that you can earn, such as boosting your base HP, attack, defense, and sometimes elemental skills. Unfortunately, I can't see much further than this first line to tell you what there are, but it does seem that there are some different types of icons in level 2 and 3, but as to what they give, I have no idea as of this point in the game so far. Either way, within that specific level, you use materials like iron and timber to earn these upgrades. However, choose wisely, since each upgrade you earn increases the amount of resources you need to get to the next one. For example, I'm favoring upgrading my Fire Mage Frederica here for obvious reasons, but her first unlock costs 2, the second one costs 5, and the third one looks like it'll cost me 10. You can buy these from the shop in limited quantities, but you can also acquire them as drops and map rewards when you clear them. It seems like resource management is going to be a pretty big deal in this game, as your currency also seems to be fairly limited right now, so you'll have to choose between going all in on one character or spreading your resources out across your team. Of course, there's always the option of unlimited grinding some of the optional maps they give you for rewards, but clearing them gives you increased conviction on Serenoa, and because I don't know what that does yet, it scares me, so I'm staying away from it lest it take me down a path I do not wish to follow. Anyways, that's it for the weapon system. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Another smaller thing to talk about here is the QP system. These seem to be unique skills that you can buy in a shop that uses a currency called kudos. To take a step back really quickly, kudos are a separate currency point that you can earn by fulfilling certain mini objectives during battles. For example, attacking from behind an enemy will give you +1 kudos. Doing a combo attack may give you another point. You get the idea. At the end of the map, these points will be added to your total currency, which you can use to buy special items called quietuses in a shop in your encampment or base of operations. As it stands, it looks like you start each battle with 2 QP. Quietuses will probably cost a different amount of QP to use, and there's even an item you can buy to raise the amount of QP you have at the start of battle, but for now they all cost 1 QP to use, and you're capped at a starting 2. Each quietus can be used once per battle, and that's it, and they have varying effects that are very interesting when combined on certain characters. One small example I tested is the critical blow one with Anna. Anna has an inherent skill called Act Twice, where she can do 2 actions within the same turn. Since critical blow covers all attacks within a single turn, and Act Twice counts as within the same turn, if Anna attacks twice, both attacks will be critical hits. These look like they'll be fun little additions, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much deeper the combos can get. Time to take another little pivot and talk about EXP and leveling up for a little bit. In this game, units level up every 100 EXP. When you level up, your HP and base stats increase at a fixed rate for every unit. There's no RNG in play here to randomly allocate stats. Every unit you use will turn out the same every time regardless of how they level up. However, one additional thing to note here is the EXP gain rate. Units will gain EXP at different rates depending on their level compared to the enemy level or recommended level of the map, as well as if they're the ones to strike the finishing blow, use an assist skill, or are a follow-up partner. As a general rule of thumb, without getting too complicated into equations and stuff like that, the lower you are below the recommended level, the higher your XP rate, and the higher you are above the EXP cap, the lower your EXP rate. I don't really have exact values because I wasn't paying too much attention, but just be aware that there's an EXP curve that seems to try and encourage you to use your whole party as opposed to bum rushing with one unit. Although I know for a fact there are certainly a bunch of individuals that won't care regardless. The last mechanical aspect I want to talk about is terrain. One of the really exciting things about Triangle Strategy is the ability for you to manipulate the terrain around you with things like spells and items. The one showcased in this demo primarily is ice magic being used to freeze tiles. Frozen tiles decrease the movement and the accuracy of units that stand on them, and they can be melted by using fire magic. From the previous demo, I also remember being able to freeze bodies of water in order to walk over them as well, and in a prior trailer I think they showed lightning magic interacting with water in some way too, so it'll be interesting to see the various interactions that the elements will have with each other. And just a little add-on to this here, since it's fairly similar, there seem to be different weather conditions that may affect certain elements or interactions. I don't have any footage or proof of this specifically, but Frederica has a skill that increases her fire damage in clear weather, for example, so I'm sure it'll play a significant role in other encounters as well. Whew, okay, I know there are a lot of gameplay elements that I've been covering, but I promise we're almost done. Just 2 more sections I want to talk about, and they're both directly related to each other, as well as to the story itself. So let's talk about the whole decision-making process that this game is parading as its main standout feature. Throughout many of the story segments, you'll be prompted to make certain decisions, and unlike a majority of RPGs on the market right now, these decisions heavily matter in Triangle Strategy. You are generally given 3 selections, each one based off one of the 3 core elements: morality, liberty, or utility. These attributes are hidden from you, so you can't exactly tell which one you're feeding into and what your total balance is, but they will eventually influence what characters you can recruit, as well as the path that your story will progress down. In addition to that, this game also has branching paths that you will be able to choose from. In order to choose a specific path, you'll need to convince your party members to vote in your favor with facts and logic. No, I'm not kidding, you actually need to do this. Before major votes like these, you'll be sent into an open exploration session in order to talk to said party members, and if you have the adequate resources or information, you'll be able to sway their vote. Speaking of exploration, I guess this is a semi-clever segue into that. It's time to cover the last gameplay element. I'm not yet sure if this applies to every single chapter, but in what seems to be most chapters, you will be given the ability to explore the area that you're in. During these exploration sessions, you can find hidden items and story-relevant items that you can use to help sway your character's decisions, or talk to NPCs to gain knowledge on things or make certain decisions that will increase one of your 3 attributes and likely influence your path down the line. These segments are a great way to explore the story and further character development, as well as learn new things about the world that you're playing in. It really brings the game to life and allows you to traverse the areas that you're in a more direct and thorough manner, as well as get to know the characters more intimately and hear their thoughts around what is going on in the moment. I personally found these segments very fun and interesting, and finding all these little world and lore building tidbits was fascinating. You really get to see how much detail they put into this game. Anyways, I think this video is long enough at this point and quite detailed for just the first 3 chapters of the game. I know I mostly covered the superficial stuff and the basics, but I think that's as much as I can do without being speculative at this point in time. I will be featuring this game more on the channel moving forward with some guides and maybe some analysis later on once it's out, so if you're interested, feel free to subscribe and maybe leave a like or a comment. I'm definitely interested to hear what you guys think so far and if I missed anything that you've noticed from playing the demo. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you all in another video very soon. Peace.